Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
Good afternoon. This is Fire Chief Paul Smith with Bill Lellis this afternoon, and we're going to bring you another exciting Fire Facts edition, and we are sponsored by the Marin Fire Chiefs. Good afternoon. This is Fire Chief Paul Smith with Bill Lellis this afternoon, and we're going to bring you another exciting Fire Facts edition, and we are sponsored by the Marin Fire Chiefs. Good afternoon. This is Good afternoon. This is Fire Chief Paul Smith with Bill Lellis, and we're going to do another exciting adventure of Fire Facts this afternoon. We're sponsored by the Marin Fire History Group and the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association. And Bill and I, chatting recently about smoke detector systems. We did fire sprinkler systems, and one thing led to another, and we started talking about fire alarm systems. So good afternoon, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing good, Paul. I'm doing good.
Good. When you and I chatted last, we talked a little bit about smoke detector systems, and one of our comments was smoke detector systems haven't been around for a long time. And I know you mentioned that, fire alarm boxes started back around Civil War time, and I had no idea. Fire alarm systems went back that far. I did know back in the old days in America, they used to ring the church bells for an alarm in the town. What do you know about alarm systems and how they started, Bill?
What we would call the municipal telegraphic mechanical alarm system came from Samuel Morris's teletype. When we went across the country and did away with the Pony Express because we could get it on wire across the country, a couple of gentlemen in Massachusetts decided both of them one was electrically orientated, and of course the invention of the wet cell battery was what made the fire alarm system become popular. And they use the same principle of the telegraph is a wire with a code. Instead of tapping it out like you see on the old westerns where they're tapping it out at the railroad station, it would be a wheel that would break the circuit. And so it would happen. So, and what happened was the first city in America to really do a fire alarm system was Boston, Massachusetts. And Boston, Massachusetts accepted what would be called Gamewell. Gamewell lost all rights to his product during the Civil War. The people who had from the South, who had patents and so forth, after the Civil War, they were didn't want to give them back to him. So a gentleman bought the patents for the Gamewell box systems and gave them back to Gamewell. And then Gamewell went off and became one of the most successful businesses in fire protection. Probably, if you look at the statistics and the amount of people and purchasing power he had, without a doubt, it's probably one of the most prolific piece of equipment that was ever sold in America. It was a fire alarm box system, so Boston was the first city to do it. Then by the end of the second year, he had 95% of the fire alarm market in America, and mostly, of course, the East Coast. And here in Marin County, San Rafael Fire Department was the first one, of course, being the biggest city. They were the first ones to install a Gamewell box system. Telephone system is still kind of out there in the shadows still. And then it appears that each city put in their own fire alarm system eventually. The districts, the only district I know of that had a fire alarm system, I could be wrong, is Novato. And Novato had a radio frequency alarm system, if you recall. And but Larkspur had the volunteers put in a full fire alarm system. For example, you didn't have to run more than a block from your home any place in Larkspur to get to a fire alarm box. And that was probably the goal. But you're right. Initially, it started out with the towers, the bell towers.
Mhm.
Bells, the Liberty Bell's the famous bell in America, but it also was used as a fire alarm bell.
Mhm.
So with that said and done, I think of all the equipment, now this is a bold statement, of all the equipment in the fire service that I know of in my study of the history, the fire alarm box mechanical system, how it runs and how it's designed, is probably the most fascinating and complicated yet simple system that we've ever seen. And its time had come and gone now, but when you look at a fire alarm box and all the intricacies and how it all works and how do you prevent one box from overriding another box and at the station and so forth, it is absolutely, for anyone out there that's mechanically inclined or electrically inclined, the fire alarm box is your toy to play with and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like you, Paul. I have one box.
Hmm.
My box is about 1917, came out of the Larkspur system. And
Okay.
I see you have a box there too. What's it about?
Yeah. 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 And I was amazed when we were doing a little research on putting this together today. You know, Bill, an unrestored box like I have in the back of me here in my background, it's worth it's worth a pile of cash now.
Yeah,
I mean, now,
1,500 bucks it up, I think.
yeah, which is amazing to me because do you remember when San Rafael took the boxes out of service?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And I remember driving by Station 2 down by Montecito because that was their training station, and they had a big pile of them out in the back.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know if they scrapped them and they sold them to collectors or whatever happened to them, but you know when they took their fire alarm system out of service, you know you wonder where all that stuff went, and it was probably real reasonable back in the day, but here you are, you move 25 years to where we are today in 2021. And gosh darn, things have become a collector's item.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, and the fire alarm boxes again in Larkspur. We wouldn't like everybody else. Why did the fire alarm boxes go out of service? Well, the invention of telephone. Then
Right.
now had telephones. You could run to a neighbor's house if you didn't have it. They'd call, and of course, in those days there wasn't 911 yet, 911.
Right.
Everyone had their own little phone. They put it in the cradle of the phone, and that was your 911 call. At the time, it was a 7-digit number. But in Larkspur, same thing. I bet if you analyzed, I think I'll give you an example. New York City.
Okay.
New York City has 15,000 street boxes. Why you and I call street 15,000. They have tried to do away with them because of phones and cell phones. They went to court, and the courts ruled no, you can't take them down.
Oh, really?
So they're out there. They're kind of being serviced. I think they're being probably stolen off corners, but they weigh a ton. The New York City street boxes weigh about 700 pounds. Because
Oh,
they're big cast iron pedestal. They sit on top. So,
right.
but they of those, and everyone was the same. Larkspur was the same. I'm sure San Rafael, Sausalito, Mill Valley. If you analyze all the alarms that came in on a fire alarm box system, probably 2% were fires, and all the rest were false alarms. And that's what started to snowball once phones came into service. When you start analyzing the runs you had to go to, that it became evident that, hey, maybe their time has come.
Yeah.
It's time
Yeah.
to come down.
Yeah. Well, like we chatted before, back in the 19-teens and 1920s, not everybody had a phone.
Right. Yes.
And they still had fires in their towns and their villages and their cities. And so the best way, the most efficient way was to run down to the corner box like you described and pull a box to get some help coming.
One of the things about the fire alarm system, the telegraph fire alarm system, there was also in station is how you call the volunteers now.
True.
You put a hook, I mean, a digital alarm on the horn and pulled it, and it would blow the air horn, and the volunteers would come to the station, look at the blackboard, get in the rig, and go to the call. That's how it came. That's one of the benefits of it, of the thing. But Larkspur we took our system down when the cable came by. When Comcast first cable was being strung. Believe it or not, the first cable that came to my house was $10 a month. Imagine that, $10 a month. But what we did is we had all this copper wire in the air all over town. And we had miles and miles of copper wire. And we convinced two young guys who were working for the cable company, stringing cable to the houses, that if they took down the copper wire, they could have it. And they jumped at it.
Oh,
And all they did is take it down, burn off the insulation, and they had pounds and pounds and pounds of copper.
yeah.
So
Yeah. You're right. We're talking about the system, the backbone of it. It was copper wire and a battery.
yeah,
That was the backbone of it. And each box had a number on it.
Right.
And that corresponded to the cogs in the
That's right.
box. Right. And that the circuit opened and closed, opened and closed. And so the fire department headquarters or alarm center could geographically tell the firefighters via radio or phone which box had been pulled.
Right. Yes.
So they were addressable. Now, here we go back to fire prevention again. How many? When did you say the boxes started in Boston? Of course, they're from Boston. Everything.
No.
No, you're cracking me up. Everything's from Boston.
No, 1850 is first one.
Okay, 1850,
Jakes.
which was pre-Civil War.
Pre-Civil War.
Okay.
Civil War in the northeast part of the country pretty well didn't get hurt, damaged much like the South did. So the South had boxes alarm, and that's where
Yes.
they lost it. But they
Yeah. But it was a really simple system, if you will. How many years? Now that you said 1850s when the alarm boxes came in and they were addressable. How many years forward did we have to go? At least 100. It was after 1950 before smoke detectors became addressable, right?
Yeah, the first addressable. No, that we need to watch our terminology.
Yeah.
To me, addressable, like you and I said, when you say addressable now, to me, it tells me the smoke detector is on the first floor.
Right.
In
Right.
the lab. That's an addressable.
Right.
The old days, the first one that came out in the 1960s. The first battery operated smoke detector for single family homes came out in the 1960s.
But that wasn't addressable. That didn't call the fire department and tell the fire department where the smoke detector was going off.
That's right.
Now we're getting in, maybe we're going a little too far out of our league here with the alarm box things we're talking about today. But you take a look, on 1850, they knew the corner of First and Jones Street was where that alarm box was. And we have to come 150 years later to get addressable, smoke detectors and other technology. Now we have a question here, Bill, and I think that's a good one for us. Pete in Petaluma wants to know: have the fire alarm boxes gone away completely? Are they wireless now? Are there any communities still using them?
The only city I know of in Northern California that probably still has street boxes is San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Boxes in San Francisco are used primarily, believe it or not, in the Chinese community. Because even though they have Chinese dispatchers, interpreters at the dispatch center for 911, apparently a major portion of the calls, working fire calls that come in from Chinatown are by way of street box. So you drive through San Francisco and you're in Chinatown, you will see the street boxes. And still
in the east, they're still around. I go to the smaller communities in the east, the combination department, and you still see street boxes. They're still out there. They used to.
The maintenance is still a lot of work. And if people forget, why did we blow the air horn? Once you put an alarm system in, you had to check the circuitry at least once a day. And most of us checked it 3 times a day. So we blew it at 8, noon, and 5. And at the time it blew, we get to check all the circuitry from the batteries up to the tape, up to the gong, up to the air horn. All had to be synchronized.
Right.
And what people don't realize is when you put in a fire alarm box system, every box in your town had to have be the same cycle. In other words, let's say it took 35 seconds for it to complete a round. A lot like the box you have, it's a large number. Now that would take like 35 seconds to hit the cogs on all of those numbers. 35 seconds. Now every box in the town, let's say you had 100 boxes, every one of them had to be on the same time sequence.
Timer, right. The timer had to be the same.
It had to be the same.
Had to be the same.
The next time over could be 1.5 minutes, and yours was 2 minutes. But if you had 100 boxes like San Rafael probably did, and all of us had, but when you ordered them from Gamewell, and you told them the time sequence you wanted. So then when you bought the horns up on the tower, all your air horns, compressors, everything had to be timed for the whatever the street boxes that you ordered timed. So everything, the tape could punch out at the right time, the air horn could operate at the right cycle and at the right time. So it's a very intricate system, the whole thing, from the air horn to the tape coming across that we used to read out at the station. So it was
I saw one of those systems probably had to be 40 years ago, Bill, when San Anselmo Fire Department, they had some street boxes. They had the tape with the machine, and the dispatcher or the firefighter and a house mouse could read the tape. I've got a question here from Samuel in Sausalito. I'll take part of this, and then Bill, if you'd follow up. Did the boxes get incorrectly used to call the police instead of the fire department? Now, the last working fire that I went to, that I recall going to, that was called in by a box alarm, was on the corner of 4th and Lincoln in Santa Fe, and it was the Lincoln Hotel. And I went to a couple fires there, and you and I said this more than once. I cut my teeth fighting fire in Santa Fe because they would get a good working structure fire more than Kentfield or Larkspur would.
Oh, yes.
We spent a lot of time over the hill. So my point is, Lincoln Hotel's on fire, 3-story balloon frame construction, a typical retail down below, and 2 or 3 stories of residents up there. And I remember battalion chief or deputy chief on that night was Tompkins, Chief Tompkins. And things are starting to wind down. We're winding up, and I hear him talking to one of the other Santa Fe fire officers on the corner. He goes, "It was a good fire. It was a good working fire." And he says, "Man, I knew it was something because before he left the station downtown, he heard the box ring out 2 or 3 times because people were panicking." Right. So they kept pulling the box. And I think, you're right. There's probably a 30-second timer in Santa Fe. So by the time the guys got out the door, they knew that he figured it was a working fire. Figured it was a working fire early in the morning in Santa Fe. So did the boxes get used incorrectly to call the police? I don't know. I would imagine probably what people would do is they'd pull the box because they needed help.
Right. Also, how they worked it is first and foremost, the first fire alarm boxes had a telegraph key at the bottom of it. So when the captain or the chief officer came and opened the box, and he wanted the second alarm, he would go down to the telegraph key at the bottom of the box and tap out 2. Pause, tap out 2, telling dispatch, we want a second alarm. If he typed out 3, pause, typed out 3, told dispatch we want a 3rd alarm. So that's how they determined how many engines they need to respond to the box once they all got to the box. So, but at the same time, the wiring system, you'll see it, a red box and a blue box back to back on the same pedestal kind of.
Right.
So on the other side, a police officer could tap into the station on his side, talk to his dispatcher, And in most cases, the dispatcher's in the same place. Our fire alarm system and their radio frequency, their alarm system went to the same box, same room, someplace in the city. And that's how so you'll see that a blue and a red box back to back. And that's
You do.
your first system that police officers could go up and check in and tell people by checking in, the dispatch knew they were safe.
Right.
Remember now, we didn't have radios yet, portable radios or anything like that. So to make sure the officer, you'll see the old movies where the police officer goes up and taps in, telling dispatch, this is officer such and such on beat such and such. We're good. So
Yeah. You know, and I know Dan on his piece, he did a calling all cars piece on radio, history of radio frequencies and radio dispatch and police cars, calling all cars a few years ago. And it was very informative because unlike the fire engines, a lot of the patrol cars had one police officer in it. That was it. And there was no HT, there was no portable radio, there was no nothing. He had a radio in his car. They get back to your car. But if you're walking the beat, you get 3 or 4 blocks down away from your car, I can see that could be an issue. And that's why they had the police boxes on the corners too.
Yeah.
In the larger towns.
And I can only speak to Larkspur, but the fire department we dispatched, we got what you would call a 911 call, a 911 call. It came to us, and we had all 24/7, and we would respond. And the only way we could notify the police officer that's on patrol, we had a big red light at the corner of Magnolia and King. You could pretty much see it around town, and from the Greenberry Hills, you could look over and see if the light was on. And I told him to come into the station, no matter where he was. He had to drive to the station, come to the firehouse, and we'd give him the note that someone's in someone's backyard.
Yeah.
Someone's home. That's how antiquated the system was, but it was a good system for the time.
It worked for the time. Yeah. Well, maybe. We got another question from George in Marinwood. Were there a lot of false alarms caused by pranksters, and what could you do about them? And as you said before, when I was a kid growing up in the 50s and the 60s, I lived in Oakland, and we had fire alarm boxes, but that was something they taught you in school. That was the thing parents would always talk about is, hey, never pull that thing unless there's a real emergency, never pull a firebox. And we know that was part of the demise and the problems with fire alarm boxes in towns is, kids would want to see the fire engine, they'd pull the box, and the fire engine would come up the street. Problem with that is, if they're on another emergency or they get called away from one call or to answer fire alarm box, and somebody else down the street has a real emergency, a false alarm causes problems. So what do you think about the pranksters? You have any good stories about kids, Bill?
Well, we had our share of false alarms. Everyone did, but the history of the fire alarm boxes, and as it relates to that system, the first boxes had, if you wanted to pull it and open the box, there would be a note on the box saying Joe's Shoemaker, the shoe shop or the drugstore down the street has the key. You'd have to go to the drugstore, get the key from the druggist, go back to the box, open it, and trip it. That's now we're talking 1850s, 1840s now. So that was the first how you had to do that. And then they started putting a key in for the public. Well, then the keys kept getting stolen or broken off.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a problem. So what they have in your box is a later edition, so you don't see it. But the old, like my box, has what we call a dog house, the key house, where the key, you break that little glass 4x4 piece of inches maybe, and that'll allow you to open the door and pull what you and I would call the hook.
Right.
That was it. So it went from go to the drugstore, get the key. And then, there you go. You see, now the doghouse is no longer there, but that was a classic. That was to protect the key from being broken off, so you could open the alarm box and send it in. Now, see, you don't have to worry about it. You just pull that hook down, and there's nothing to break off.
Right. There's no glass. There's nothing there. All you have to do is pull down the door.
That's it. But kids all did it. As I said, I would imagine if you had all the fire alarm boxes that were sounded in anybody's community, I bet only 2% of them were actually fires. All
Yeah.
Vandalism, a tree blowing down.
Yeah.
Up the canyon, a tree would blow down, take the wire out.
Yeah.
I remember in lightning and thunderstorms going out, pulling the wire back together, thinking, well, we need to keep the box system opened up in Madrone Canyon or something like that. I'm thinking, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lightning and rain, and I'm up on the top of a pole trying to put two wires together. It was nuts, but that was the way we did it, back in the 50s and early 60s. So,
well, Bill, that was the only system that was generally a reliable system, but that was all you had before folks had phones.
Anyone who's that's a hobbyist will tell you the fire alarm box system was the fastest, without a doubt, the fastest way to notify the fire department. Because faster than a telephone. Think about a telephone, you had to go through an operator. But the fire alarm box was the fastest way to notify. And all they had a location, a street corner, someplace in a block, and they would go there. And but it was so it has a great history. And again, when you get into the workings that you're showing right now, the inner workings, that is the most mechanically designed thing in the fire service. There you go, right down there.
See if I can get that.
And that's a good shot, Paul. If you can hold it right there, there's a green coil, and as we all look at the boxes, the green coil it's a non-interfering box up inside the box. Up on the upper green wire coil on my left-hand side. On the side of the left, there, right there, that green coil right there inside the glass. Inside there you go. That's what they call a non-interfering coil. And that allowed 3 street boxes to be pulled at the same time. The first one would take precedence over the circuit. The other 2 boxes that were pulled, maybe around this corner of different streets, would hold back, could not get into the circuitry until the first box clears. And then as soon as the first box cleared, the second box that was pulled now would take over the circuitry. But in the old days, it would try to get in 8 times or 16 times, and after that, it would shut off and not respond. And the new boxes that you have like that would just stay out there until it got to take over the circuit and go in. But in the early days, the old boxes would only try 8 times, 16 times, and then not report. But that's what they call a non-interfering box, which in other words, when the first boxes come out, that coil
didn't exist
there. And so you could have the tape punching all kinds of holes in it. You wouldn't even know what box is coming in. But
right.
So again, anyone who's likes mechanics and stuff like that, fire alarm boxes are a fascinating piece of equipment. Yeah.
They are. Cool. Very cool. A lot of fun. Yeah, I didn't know about the non-interfering coil.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And
zoom in here. If you look at the brass gear up here.
Yes.
This is what we were talking about before. This brass gear has got those cogs cut into it, and it's a 7424, and that's the number of the box.
That probably took about, I'm guessing about 34 seconds to do it up. And right next to it, Paul, there's a long vertical. Yeah. That's the contact, the open, close.
That contact is right here, if I'm pointing at it right.
And behind that wheel on the box that we never see because they're made in the factory that way, there's a shield that operates, opens and closes, when the wheel makes one rotation, is preventing from going on until there's one cog on the wheel that moves the little shield away and allows it, and what we call, those are 4 cycles that would blow 4 times.
Right.
That's a lot of tape if you're in the station to have that blow that many numbers. And so, and a lot of air also. If you're running an air horn at the, above, City Hall,
Right.
that's a lot of air when you have that big a box number. So like
Yeah.
that. But only the box air horns were from small towns like we had in the county. San Francisco was all tape. No one was alarm coming except at the central station. So, but self-winding, that's a self-winding. See that red handle?
Yep.
Pull that down and automatically, that automatically winds the tape.
And if we pull this, maybe before we go today, it's about 2:30. Before we go, I can pull the handle down and have the mechanics run. This is the wheel that actually, if you will, winds the clock.
Yeah.
And before we go today, maybe we could pull a handle, because you'll get a little ding ding out of it.
You see that little tab at the end of the red handle? That's in between the two red, between the wind up and the red. Yeah, that there.
Yeah.
That's prevents you from winding it so tight you'll break the spring.
Yeah.
And
Because they are. It's totally mechanical, Bill. It's just it's a mechanical wonder, just like a clock. You look at a clock and you wonder how these people put this together and machined all those parts, especially back in the early days.
Yeah. And of course, what you can't see because it's black, but you got a little, normally someplace in there, there's a plug you pull out and you can insert it and you can test the box without going into the station. Well, there you go, right there. Yeah.
I got the plug here. And an interesting thing about it is, see, it's got a test position here. So you can test the box without actually sending the alarm to the
station.
Right.
And I don't think you can close the drawer with that thing in it, so you couldn't actually get it.
Very good. I was just going to bring that up. Here's my door. See if I can move my camera a little bit.
Yeah, that's good, Paul, right there. That's nice.
But you see, this thing won't let you close the door. It's just this thing drops down in the way of the door here. But this pin, I don't know how I'm doing here. Trying to do this. There we go. And that'll hold the catch up so you can close the door now.
Yeah, there you go. All set, ready to go. Yeah, that's how simple it is, but how complicated it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things, Paul, if you open it again, if you can open it, one of the things, believe it or not, the cogwheel, depending on, that's a Gamewell, what we call a Gamewell Peerless box, a three-fold box. And I think when you pull it, it's going to go counterclockwise, counterclockwise, I'm thinking. And another box. So in other words, the wheels themselves, the clogs are replaceable.
Yep.
It's back shields that aren't replaceable, that work with the disconnect, or break the circuit.
Yep.
But I think when you pull it, if we pull at the end of the show, I think it's going to go counterclockwise.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the way the striker looks like it's going to hit it. And the note on my box, it's written in pencil here on the door. It says, was box number 1432. Yeah. So at some time in this box's career, it got changed from box 1432 to box 72 something, so 7425.
So anyway, I don't think any more questions, but they were quite the system. And you can see they got Gamewell. I think on the bottom of your box, although we can't see it, you should say Gamewell, New York City or New York or something like that at the bottom of the box.
You folks from the East, look at this, Massachusetts. There it is again.
Gamewell, Massachusetts, up in Newton Falls.
Newton, Massachusetts, Bill.
That's right. Hey, we started the law in Massachusetts. You guys screwed it up coming west.
I'll tell you. Well, this has been a lot of fun.
Yes, I hope some of the people who have been watching picked up something. But you're right, they are a very expensive toy. So if you want to buy your husband something for Christmas, ladies, buy him a pot. Yeah. So anyway.
Anyway.
Thanks. I think we're just about done, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, I think so, Bill. I mean, it's sitting here on the front porch with the dog wagging its tail, shooting the breeze with you. It's been a fun half an hour.
Yeah, I'm going to tune my banjo up here, and we'll be.
And while you tune your banjo, I'll go ahead and pull the hook.
Please, yeah. Can you open the box and we watch the guts work? And stuff
Yeah,
like
that'd be cool. That'd be fun.
that? Here we go.
Here we go, and thanks for everybody for tuning in to Marin Fire History today. And everybody stay safe out there.